Hi. And this has nothing to do with any of that, really. This is a completely new project that I just want to talk about. I quite like the way Sat had to look at his notes to find out what someone we've known for 20 years, but it's quite difficult. It's this very formal setting. And so it's just suddenly made me quite nervous because I'm thinking this is a very early project, and I've just put together a few fragments. Did anyone actually manage to get to Park Hill this morning? Oh, well done, you stars. I didn't think you'd have time. But anyway, Park Hill looms large over our landscape here, and it made me think when we were asked to talk about resilience that it's been talked about in many different ways, many different disciplines. And it doesn't have to, it's not just about climate change, it's also about more philosophical notions of our futures and hope. For the future, and hope is quite an interesting word, and this talk really presents the beginning, and I don't want you to look at me because I'm going to read it, I'm afraid, because these are fragments. I want you to look at these beautiful pictures that I've put together. No difficult graphs to look at or anything like that, just nice pictures. And they're deliberately taken from the old and the new Park Hill, but this presents the beginnings of a theoretical discussion of the relation between architecture, modernity and dwelling. Three very powerful statements, and three very late 20th century statements as well, particular modernism. And we're just started this project and we're brainstorming it. And the idea came up from some rather brainy people in the German department that we do it through the eyes of a German philosopher called Ernst Bloch. I thought, is that the same person as Mark Bloch, the historian? I've never heard of this philosopher, and I don't know, has anyone heard of Ernst Bloch? Yes. Well, you're showing your age now, Peter. But anyway, so this is my first kind of foray into it. And I also am using two other people just to look at these first things. And the first is someone well known to everyone here, one person in particular, Jeremy Till, who's written this lovely little book on Park Hill, this lovely little essay, which I was looking at. I found it just in a gallery, this book. I hadn't heard of it, and I was looking at it, I thought, what a lovely little essay. Who's that written by? And it was Jeremy, who was for those of you who don't know, our head of school until about 5-6 years ago. Anyway, this is part of a big AHRC project on connected communities, and it's the big new thing, getting us to think about communities, to get out from the universities into the city, working with neighbourhoods and working with people. And of course we've been doing that for 20 years, but it's a big new thing with the research councils and in this university. It's also really made me think about our value as architects, because I was asked to be part of this project not because I'm a researcher, a known researcher, but because I'm an architect and because of the processes that we use. And I'm also working with Kim Streets, who's the director of Sheffield Museums, and she did a project about 15 years ago with children from Park Hill, and she got them to do drawings, and they kind of analysed those drawings about living in Park Hill, so we're going to be using those. I'm also working with an art historian from the Russian department and an anthropologist from the education department. And this project will engage new and existing residents in Park Hill, in the new part of Park Hill, and in the existing unrenovated Park Hill. We'll be using kind of visual methods, sort of quite, hopefully quite creative ways of engaging people with visual kind of imagery in that, on trying to find out what they think about their new homes, and or their old homes, their existing homes that they've lived in for a long time. And we've got some fantastic examples of residents who've been there since Park Hill first was built, and including one of our ex-students who's now a well-known architect. We'll also carry out interviews with the architects, Hawkins Brown, the developers, Urban Splash and the landscape architects, to see where their influence lay. But what is all this for? We're trying to find out about the aesthetics and the function, but really what we're trying to find out is the image that the people who've built and restored Park Hill, the same as the image that the residents have, how are they responding to this modernist form and the aesthetics of these dwellings? And is it going to be sustainable? I just wanted to mention, go on the next slide. We started our work, this collaboration with these people I'm working with a little exhibition down on the moor, where we put lots of things about domesticity and asked lots of questions and got people to upload it. And we found that the people of Sheffield are really interested in where they live and their dwellings. And then I did a more sort of auto-ethnographic piece of research, which is still very much ongoing. Show the next slide, which was about people returning to their homes that they've left, or living in their homes that other people have built for them. This is done not just from the architect's point of view, but from others. This art historian friend of mine was doing it on Russian modernist houses post-war. But I actually went back and talked to some of the clients of the houses that we've built and homes that we've extended to see how successful they were. And it's quite a painful experience sometimes. And so we're trying to bring all our experiences from our past research to this. So why Park Hill? The romantic, enduring legacy of Park Hill was an obvious choice because it's seen enormous change. It's high profile architecturally, it's poetically and politically controversial, and it's part of a utopian future dream. Its many stories and layers are of tragedy and triumph. But Park Hill's also a neighbourhood, and it's a neighbourhood in change. And it's a large neighbourhood. It has over 900 homes. That's quite a lot of terraced houses. And it's the largest, of course, it's the largest listed structure in the country. So I won't talk much about Park Hill, because many of you will know about it, and I put some notes, and there's lots of information on Mole. I uploaded the original 1961 AD on Sheffield and on Park Hill when it was just built. So you can find out everything you need to know about Park Hill there. But now I just want to start with my quotes. Can you go on to the next slide? When it was first built, the architecture of Park Hill affected the change from a place of social and physical despair to a place of social and physical hope. And that's a quote from Jeremy, actually, in this little book. People were moving out of their back-to-backs, they were moving out of homes with no ventilation, no cross-ventilation at all. They were moving into this bright new world of waste disposal, which arguably never worked, but of a bright new future. But also at the same time, Nicholas Pevsner's prophetic quote in the South Yorkshire buildings of England, quote, "Could these be the slums of tomorrow? Have the architects delivered a better future for Park Hill? And how have they responded to the new aesthetics of modernism?" is the question that comes out of that. They did become slums, and not all of them, but a number of them. And as Peter called it yesterday, a lot of the shabby housing from the 1960s could be exemplified in Park Hill. But it's a towering example of a huge success and then a dramatic fall from grace into abject failure. And then came redemption and a bright new hope for city living. And I'm just going to, can we go through the next few slides? With just me look at, now these, as you can see, were taken by an architect. But then if you stop there, this is what really shows us a little insight. This is what we're trying to get at, of the kind of people that are now living in Park Hill and what they put in their windows. This is the kind of thing that anthropologists get very excited about, objects in windows. And there are some just marvellous examples when you walk around Park Hill, and I hope some of you saw these today, you might well have seen them. There's one of the elderly residents and her flowers, and some nice little sort of maquette of little cars. And the next one. Next slide, please. Oh, and there's the architect in that one, you can tell. And then somebody who's clearly been to Africa or India and brought back their elephants. And so now we begin to learn a little about the stories of the lives of people who who live there. So the upside of Park Hill when it was first built, people were moving out, as I said, of the back-to-backs. They had these amazing new services. And Jeremy wrote about this, I didn't know about this. The social worker, Mrs. Demons, from the council, put neighbours and friends together. That could be a bad thing or a good thing, when she moved them from the back-to-backs into Park Hill. There was a school, 3 pubs, lots of shops. It was all upward of Parker Morris standards, good standards for housing, and the views and the balconies and the fresh air were amazing. The downside, however, was manifold. After a number of years, it became particularly good, and there was a particular moment when they cleared all the drug dealers out of Burngrave and they started to congregate in Park Hill, because the streets in the air were perfect private places to make their transactions. And then when the police did arrive, they could skiddle-daddle down to the station and get on a train really easily. And I'm here using Jeremy's critique, and I'm just going to read it. Waste, dirt and contingency all come back to haunt the unattainable illusions of the modern project, be it architectural modernism or the welfare state. And I'm quoting someone else who's very familiar here. This is Irena's father, famous Sigmund Baumann, and his statement that post-modernity is modernity without illusions. And this is a summary of his argument that the age of post-modernity is not a break, not something that is after modernity, but something that is the reality of modernity, in which contingency, uncertainty, and lack of control are inevitable conditions we have to face. Looking at the brochure now of Park Hill and the new apartments, we can be cynical. And again, Jeremy's slightly harsh words about architects are true. He says the notion of redemption through order, beauty and cleanliness is hopeless, although architects try and do it. And it's still a notion that architects cling to. However, a friend of mine has bought an apartment in Park Hill, and I went to visit it. And we sat there with it empty, and those were the photographs right at the beginning of it. And, you know, I felt myself beginning to drool. You know, where would I place my very best pots? What bed linen would I have, you know? And then, you know, and I was totally taken in by it, you know, as we are, wouldn't you be, if you were offered a nice apartment in Park Hill? And you can, if you're lucky, you can get shown around one. There's still the show flat there. And at the centenary celebrations of the School of Architecture, Ivor Smith, one of the architects, the original architects of Park Smith, that was built by the architects from the local authority, he was in his late 80s, and he came and talked about what he would have done differently. And he was particularly exercised, I found it incredibly moving, actually, by the front entrances and the lack of any window onto these streets in the air, which allowed them to become so dangerous. And he said, I would have talked to people more, and I would have changed this. We now know, well, that for public safety and security, we always need the gaze of people and windows onto public space, and that this is vital. So this is just one of many dilemmas of modern living. And as architects, hoping and planning for a better future. It's very complex. So this is where I get to the bit about Ernst Bloch. And I think the reason that architects don't really like referring to him much is that he was a real critic of modernism. But when you look through that, and I'm hoping what I'll be able to engage with, is a real understanding of, in a way, what he's saying, because what his comments were, of course, completely based in the time that he was living. And that was just pre-war and post-war, as you know, in Germany. So what we're trying to find out in this research project is, can Park Hill become a successful neighbourhood again? Does the social manipulation of the Sheffield Housing Department, who have again helped place people and handpicked retirees and put them in Park Hill, in fact we can see in their windows, with people buying apartments to rent, or people who aren't going to be there very long. Park Hill at the moment, the new Park Hill, is a sort of triumph of style and modernity over aesthetics and, say that again. Is a triumph of style, modernity and aesthetics over dwelling. Can you go on to the next one? That's my next quote, again from Jeremy. It's very quotable today. And you can read that, but I'll read it with you. Architects are, or at least like to think of themselves as liberal optimists, set with the belief of making the world a better place. The trouble is that notions of redemptive beauty or deterministic functionalism mean that those aspirations are misplaced. Sorry, there's an error there. People are not abstractions. They do not submit to the reason of functionalism. They have emotions, lives, accidents and politics. The space of abstraction cannot accommodate the spatiality of being. And there he's following Henri Lefebvre, and he's really talking about the sociality of being. And so the architecture of the welfare state begins to show the strain as this contingency of life begins to undermine the order of the frame that holds it. And I think that's actually quite brilliant, that bit, because Park Hill is a frame. If you go on to the next, so hopefully there's one of a frame.
4 minutes, Prue.
Yep. Of a frame here. So modernism, as Jeremy Till and many others say, is most problematic when you're considering people's homes. And architects have been criticised enormously by academics, one in particular, Coleman, shifting the responsibility of social deprivation from society to the built form in a semi-determinist manner. It's not the politician's fault, it is the architect and planner's fault. Ernst Bloch, a German philosopher, born in 1885 to 1977, wrote his whole life about concerns of utopia and hope. He left Germany, and incidentally he was married to an architect who kept him for most, or certain periods in his life when he didn't have an academic post. So he understood well the reasons for the modern movement and the necessity for change. Go to the next image. He talks of the reoccurring importance of utopia in daydreams. Bloch sees hope to be an essential force in everybody's lives, because being strives to fulfill itself by realising that which is not yet being, i.e. we don't know because it's in the future. He uses a very rich language full of imagery, and in his famous Building on Hollow Space, which is his critique on modern architecture, I'll show another one. Another slide, next slide. He talks of his term for space, for the space of capitalism, where the glimmering surface is no more than an empty shell with no interior truth, corresponding to the hollow pretense of its exterior display. Capitalism hollows out life, perverting the energy produced by hope into a meaningless pursuit of empty values. And I'll skip that next slide. Yep. Park Hill's concrete frame is infilled with brickwork. Can you just go back to the last one? Yep. Originally, the bricks lightened in colour from the bottom to the top, giving a variation and levity to the whole, having the quality of the peaks, maybe even of the hills. The effect of the frame versus the infill is to hold multiple visions of everyday life together in a coherent manner. So maybe that's, we just don't notice how poetic some of these things were in the past when they're dirty and old and stained. And Bloch talks about his interest in expressionism and in montage, fragments drawn from reality. Isolating the best fragments drawn from reality and deploying them in a new pattern. And that's my end note now. Just go back to the last two slides. And another one, yeah, just a few more there. Here we go. So, hope is an important part of our deepest desires. This is another quote, but you can be reading that one as well. Expressed in our view of the world. Hope that the future will be bright. Hope that the world will still be here and a better place long after we left. I propose to you that Park Hill is a resilient place, not yet a neighbourhood, but it is the architecture of social and physical hope in the future, and I hope we can discuss that.